Perhaps we should start with you telling us a little about yourself.
I like English cookery, English beer, French red wine, Spanish white wine, Indian tea, strong tobacco, coal fire, candlelight, and comfortable chairs.
This is George Orwell. In an interview recorded shortly after World War II, Orwell sat down with the BBC to discuss his infamous works, including 1984 and Animal Farm. But isn't this a video about Jordan Peterson? Yes, it is. We'll get to him. But first, we need to cover a critical aspect of modern thought. See, in his novel 1984, Orwell expressed the importance of controlling thought and the ability for those controlling the narrative to control the perspective of the masses across time. He wrote, "For after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4, or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is unchangeable? If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and itself is controllable, what then?" Well, you see, Jordan Peterson is fighting a battle for truth.
Jordan Peterson? Trending #1 on Twitter?
You may not agree with his opinions. That's completely fine. That's even encouraged.
Jordan Peterson? International bestseller?
But to cast him out as a mean white man or a dangerous prophet of the alt-right is to blind yourself to simple facts fulfilled by a 5-second Google search.
You have no idea if I'm your enemy.
Dr. Peterson has committed himself to scorn, ostracization, and vitriol for standing up for the truth.
You have no idea about me.
You won't use my pronouns, so I'm pretty sure you're my enemy, yes.
Yeah, well, I know you think that, but I don't believe that using your pronouns is going to do you any good in the long run. I think it'll do quite the contrary.
You're just saying things, though, to provoke, aren't you? I mean, you are a provocateur.
I never said
You're like
anything.
the alt-right that you hate to be compared to. You want to stir things up.
I'm only a provocateur insofar as when I say what I believe to be true, it's provocative.
You're doing well, but you're a mean, mad white man, and you're gonna get us right. And
Don't let those who control the present control Dr. Peterson's past or his future.
What were you like when I was 25?
I do not think one can assess a writer's motives without knowing something of his early development.
Well, I was obsessed. I was kind of going every direction at the same time.
His subject matter will be determined by the age in which he lives.
I was from northern Alberta, this rough little town up in northern Alberta called Fairview, and there were long winters there, and my friends were heavy drinkers, and most of them dropped out of school by the time they were 15 or 16, went off to work on the oil rigs. And I grew up on wild meat. My dad hunts. He still hunts. He's 82. He's slowing down a little bit, obviously, because he's getting old. But
yeah, he's using a gun now instead of a knife.
Yeah.
When he's out.
It was a rough town, and we drank a lot. I started when I was 14.
But before he ever begins to write, he will have acquired an emotional attitude from which he will never completely escape.
But I decided around then, about 85, 84, something like that, maybe a little earlier, that I was really going to try to get my act together. I quit smoking. I had to quit drinking too in order to quit smoking. And I got to the point where I could bench press 225 pounds. I think that was the best I did. And I gained about 30 pounds of muscle in a year and a half. I got married. Well, the woman who's my wife, Tammy, I was in love with her like the first time I saw her, which is quite the bloody thing.
And at the bottom of their motives there lies a mystery.
I was working on these hard problems that I've been discussing with all of you, and I've been working on them really, obsessively since I was probably about 18, maybe even earlier than that. Got to the point around 25 when I was in graduate school trying to get my PhD, so doing all my research. Like I published 15 papers by the time I graduated with my PhD.
Writing a book is a horrible, exhausting struggle, like a long bout with some painful illness.
And at the same time, I wrote Maps of Meaning, which was a terrible, terrible, terribly difficult thing to do.
One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven by some demon one can neither resist nor fully comprehend.
If you go into your room and it's all covered with stacks of paper and they're all messy, then what you're doing basically is walking into a room of snakes.
After receiving his PhD, Peterson became one of the most distinguished and accomplished psychologists of the 21st century. 6 years ago, in March of 2013, he launched a YouTube channel, posting a series of lectures from his class, Maps of Meaning.
It's the circuitry that responds to the dragon of chaos.
With an audience of roughly 1 million subscribers, Peterson decided to exit the classroom and enter the public sphere, speaking out against Canadian Bill C-16.
Could you repeat one more time your response to Senators Gold and Pratt, your objection to using pronouns?
Well, I think it's been made clear in the presentation so far is that it depends on which part of the Ontario Human Rights Commission's policies you read.
Peterson traveled to Los Angeles in 2016 to speak with Joe Rogan on the Canadian controversy and the persistence of political correctness from the quads of college campuses to the texts of national legislation.
All right, we're live. In Canada, Canada is very different than the United States. You've got some weird shit going on up there. What they're doing is they're promoting what you would call online social justice warrior values. You are one of the very few academics who have fought against some of these ideas that are not just being promoted, but are being enforced. Professor Peterson, what the hell's going on? What is this?
Well, I think it's partly a form of narcissism.
Yes.
It's partly a consequence of the rise of the new rise again of say Marxist doctrine. I would say it's part of postmodernism. Maybe it's postmodernism more than anything else. Because the postmodernists, that's a philosophical community, let's say, believe that the entire point of human categorization is power.
Sign here, please.
And that dialogue between people is only a power dialogue.
Thank you. Same again, please. What's that? Press harder this time. Good.
And that there's no real reality outside of interpretation, and that basically what we do is exchange interpretive viewpoints to ratchet up our dominance and status.
That is your receipt for your husband. Thank you. And this is my receipt for your receipt.
Having achieved this new status, he began to appear on podcasts to discuss such things as cleaning your room.
Yeah, like leave your house alone for a year.
Yeah.
See what happens to it. It's like, oh, it's way better. It's like, no, it's not. It has black mold everywhere, right? And a vandal has moved in. There's graffiti everywhere. And
there's squirrels drawing a pentagram. Like things have gotten out of hand.
Exactly. That's definitely not good when that happens.
And the rise of political correctness.
Where did it come from? How did we get to this place where we're so fragile?
Oh, I think that you can pretty much blame it on the universities. A university isn't a home. That's not what it is. It's a place to be confronted by, I would say, often horrible ideas. I think you can lay a lot of it at the feet of faculties like the faculties of education. You want to learn about history? You think that's going to be safe? Do you know what human history is like? It's an endless bloodbath. There was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education this week that just devastated the faculties of education, taking them to task for low academic standards with a certain amount of hopeful progress underlying it. It's a horror show. And for possession by ideology and for basically indoctrinating people in a cult-like manner and playing identity politics and group identity. And
no free speech.
One in five social scientists claims to be a Marxist.
How do they not understand the history? Well, why don't you fill people in on how that went bad?
Well, the estimates vary, but in the Soviet Union between 1919 and 1959, somewhere between 30 and 50 million people were killed in internal oppression alone. So that's pretty bad. You think that makes you feel safe? It doesn't make you feel safe to know that Nazis were humans and you happen to be one of them.
Hoffman loved to present his master as a family man, quiet, unassuming.
Of the peoples inhabiting the country.
With many looking to him as a guide throughout this hectic time period, Peterson also began to receive intense criticism, and even the manipulation of his words. Perhaps the most outrageous instance of this came when Vice sat down to interview Peterson in his own house.
One of the conversations that you had that I found to be shocking, and it started a trend of misquoting and misrepresenting you, was you did an interview with Vice, and they use a snippet of one of the things you said.
How many years will it take for men and women working in the workplace together?
More than 40.
To get a sense. More than 40?
Mm-hmm. We're new at this.
We're new at this.
Absolutely.
We're completely new at it. It's only been a couple of generations. That's part of the problem.
The makeup one was particularly annoying to me because I think it's a valid conversation.
Here's a rule. How about no makeup in the workplace?
Why would that be a rule?
Why should you wear makeup in the workplace? Isn't that sexually provocative? I said, and they didn't put this in their initial cut, I said, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be allowed to wear makeup in the workplace.
I don't know why.
Why do you make your lips red? Because they turn red during sexual arousal. That's why. Why do you put rouge on your cheeks? Same reason.
So your argument.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't wear makeup.
No, I'm not saying that. But you're saying that
I'm saying we don't know what the rules are. I'm not saying that women shouldn't do it, and I'm also not saying that it should be banned. But I'm saying that you're absolutely naive if you don't think that that has anything to do with sexuality. You know, you asked earlier, well, why do I get pilloried with some regularity?
Yes.
And some of it is probably my own inadequacy. You know, and I can get hot under the collar. It's a mistake. It's a mistake because the right approach in these situations is to use minimal necessary force and to allow myself to get irritated, let's say, even minorly, when I'm faced with someone who's doing this, is not productive, doesn't work well. And so I really need to keep that under control. And when I do keep it under control, it works better.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me
Perhaps the most infamous interview with Jordan Peterson to date was hosted by Kathy Newman on Channel 4, shortly after the controversy of Bill C-16. Repeatedly throughout the interview, she says, "You're saying, so you've said, so what you mean is," and tries to conflate his words and make it sound like he is saying things that are completely reprehensible and completely not what he's been
saying. That sounds pretty
saying.
bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crisis of masculinity? I mean, you're saying women have some sort of duty to sort of help fix the crisis of masculinity.
So
you're
if you
saying
want
women
domination-
want to dominate. You're saying you've done your research and women are unhappy dominating men. But you're saying basically it doesn't matter if women aren't getting to the top. But you're saying, well, that's just a fact. You're saying it's a fact
there are
of
multiple.
life. Right, you're just saying that's the way it is. But you're saying it's not because of gender, it's because women are too agreeable to ask for pay rises. But you're saying that makes them unhappy.
And I actually haven't said that so far in
You're
the
saying
program.
it makes them miserable. Okay, you say women become more vulnerable when they have children. So you're saying women are just more sensible. They don't want that. So you're saying that anyone who believes in equality, whether you call them feminists, call them whatever you want to call them, should basically give up because it ain't going to happen. So you're saying give people, is what you're saying.
And so
you're
does
saying
high
that,
negative emotion.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No.
Well, you were saying that
Weren't
intelligence
female
and
traits.
conscientiousness by implication are not female traits. You're just
That's
saying these
murderous.
things, though, to provoke, aren't you? You are a provocateur.
I never said
You're like
anything.
the alt-right that you hate to be compared to.
Now, at this point in the interview, I was planning on showing you the more infamous clip where he calls her on calling him out on the issue of freedom of speech, saying that she should be questioning him because everyone should not have protection from ideas that may be challenging to them. But when I tried to post this to YouTube, YouTube demonetized it and made it so that the video wouldn't be able to be seen because of a claim by Channel 4. And that really sucks. So all I can say is go watch the video for yourself. It's incredible, and it shows a level of understanding of Jordan Peterson that few people are able to recognize. And that's one of the reasons why the video has so many views. So to Kathy Newman, I say that about this point, I feel you.
I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
Ha, gotcha.
you have got me. You have got me.
Every time I've been pushed into a corner and remained composed, the narrative reversed every single time.
That's what something I've noted is that every time they come at you, you get more followers. For every critic that comes at you, you get 10 more followers. And this pattern we've seen it over and over again, and yet they still come.
Yeah, less though.
But the thing is, it really goes back to what you said. They're being expedient.
Yeah.
You're being genuine.
Yeah. Mostly the ones who come after me now are academics who are incautious, let's put it that way, because that's certainly what they are. They're incautious. And journalists who are unscrupulous and looking to
Get some
muckrake.
clicks.
Yeah.
So let's get back to George Orwell. Remember earlier when I asked you to keep in mind the quote about truth? The quote from 1984 that said, "For after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4? Well, what if I told you that, despite making it this far into the video, you haven't seen George Orwell once? Would you believe me? You see, the man on the screen is not George Orwell. That's actor Chris Langham, who was cast to speak Orwell's words in response to real questions that were posed to the author during his lifetime. You see, despite passing away at only 46, Orwell left an imposingly large body of written work. A few photos captured the author in his prime, but as far as sound or film of the beloved author, nothing exists. This BBC documentary, however, inserts actor Chris Langham back in time.
In an early documentary, Orwell is an imperial policeman. In a film essay, he's a kitchen hand.
Roughly speaking, the more one is obliged to pay for food, the more sweat and spittle one is obliged to eat with it.
Just like Forrest Gump, placing him into real historical footage constructed around Orwell's words and real-life actions.
And enormous piles of rubble, out of which iron girders thrust themselves like sticks of rhubarb.
Though Chris Langham may represent a certain perspective on this great author, he can never embody the author in the way that the real George Orwell did for 46 years on this earth. Similarly, the headlines and edited interviews of Jordan Peterson cannot present the true beliefs, convictions, and emotions of a man dedicated to shining a light on the optimistic characteristics and opportunities that remain present beneath our society.
God, let me tell you a story, man. One time I had this client. This woman was just ruined. She looked like a street person, you know, and she had very dirty clothes, and she was so shy that she couldn't even approach you. She had to shield her eyes from you as if you were emitting light. And she wasn't bright, this woman. I think she had only had like a 7th grade education. She was quite intellectually impaired, and she lived with her sick aunt who was schizophrenic and who had a satanically possessed alcoholic boyfriend that was always tormenting my client. She lived in absolute hell. But she had this dog, and she used to take it out and walk the dog all the time. She'd come to this place called the Douglas Hospital, and she'd been an inpatient in the Douglas Hospital. And in the Douglas Hospital, there were these long-term psychiatric clients, and they looked like something out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting. This is way worse than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. These people were seriously destroyed. And she thought that maybe when she took her dog out for a walk, she could go and get one of those damn inmates and take them out for a walk too. Now that was a person who was immoral, dumb as a post, just screwed in 50 different directions, nothing going for her. And she had the bloody moral capacity to decide that there was someone worse off than her, and believe me, that wasn't easy to find, and that maybe she could do them some good if the hospital would let her, which they didn't, by the way. Yeah, well, that's the story of the soul. That's not the intellect, that's for sure.
Remember Orwell's warning
from
his infamous 1984. Who controls the past, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. Do not let those controlling the current narrative inform you on the angels and the devils of the present moment.
Sort yourself out.
Sort yourself out before you try to figure out the world, and that's the primary objective.
Yep.
That's your most important thing that you can do.
Yep,
sort
absolutely.
yourself out.
Sort yourself out.
Pick up your 1984. Pick up 12 Rules for Life. Read the words of these figures for yourself to create your own perspective on their opinions.
And marshal your arguments and put yourself in order so that when someone pushes you a little farther than you should go, you can say no.
Without a personal motivation to discover history, belief systems, and opinions for ourselves, we confine ourselves to the ever-clogging mudslide of headlines and slander, confining ourselves for all of time to a zealous adoration only to the voices inside our telescreens, and a crippling fear of thought deemed criminal.